our YouTube. Okay, so we'd like to start off with a land acknowledgement. So every community owes its existence and vitality to generations from around the world who contributed their hopes, dreams, and energy to making the history that led to this moment. Some were brought here against their will, some were drawn to leave their distant homes in hope of a better life, and some have lived on this land for more generations than can be counted. Truth and acknowledgement are critical to building mutual respect and connection across all barriers of heritage and difference. We begin this effort to acknowledge what has been buried by honoring the truth. The place where Georgia College is located, that we call Milledgeville, Georgia, is the traditional homeland of the Muscogee Creek Nation. We pay respects to their elders, past and present. Please take a moment to consider the many legacies of violence, displacement, migration, and settlement that bring us here together today.
Thank you, Melissa. I would like to begin in Australia by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the many lands from which we meet today and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, particularly the Wiradjuri, Ngunnawal, Gundungurra and the Biripi people of Australia, who are the traditional custodians on the lands on which Charles Sturt campuses are located. I extend that respect to any First Nations people who we have here with us today, and I acknowledge this land has never been ceded and was and is and will always be First Nations land. I would also like to pay my respects separately to LGBTQI+ people who've come before us, who've really paved the way for us and fought for us and for our rights. It is to them that we owe the pleasure of being able to stand here and talk about coming out in such a public way. So I'd like to acknowledge their contribution to my well-being and the well-being of our LGBT communities across Australia and the US. Now, coming out is a very hard experience, and you plan for it. You have this whole script in your head. You worry about it. You think, this is how I'm going to do it. But it is the one thing that unites LGBT people around the world. It is the one thing that unites us who depart from the norm in terms of what society expects based on sexuality or sexual orientation. It is incredibly hard, though. It is hard because you do not want to hurt. You do not want to be isolated, cut off from your family. You also do not want to hurt the people you love. For me, as a person of Indian origin who is Catholic, I was more concerned about my mum and dad and what would happen to them. It's hard sometimes because there is no place that says it's okay to be yourself here. A place that says you belong here in your true and honest and authentic self. And this is particularly the case in rural regional areas where Charles Sturt and Georgia College campuses are located. You may not know anyone who is LGBTQI+. Within these rural locations, and imagine the paralyzing fear of knowing you are different but not being able to be yourself and behave in the way that suits you. Coming out, though, is also a beautiful experience. I remember the peace I felt the day I came out and the happiness that I felt internally. The mental health benefits, the power of accepting yourself is absolutely amazing. So through this event, we want to change that narrative about coming out and transform it from being the scary thing to being something that is actually empowering, about welcoming people into your reality. Most of all, we want everyone here to know that we as institutions are committed to helping you be your authentic self. We have this wonderful panel here who have come together to share their experiences and to talk about what it means about coming out. And we've done this today to mark the National Coming Out Day. And Melissa will tell us a little bit about National Coming Out Day.
Yeah, so National Coming Out Day is a holiday that's celebrated here in the United States. It started in 1987. That's held every year on October 11th. And that date in specific was chosen because it's the anniversary of the 1987 March on Washington for lesbian and gay rights. And so the whole idea behind this holiday is the fact that coming out is one of the greatest powers that we as LGBT people have, that, the more likely folks are to support equality when they know somebody personally who's LGBT. So that's kind of the whole point behind this, national holiday that we have. But it's also important to talk about the power of, coming out stories and connecting with other folks within the community as well, including those who maybe haven't made that step yet. And in just encouraging and, affirming anybody, depending on where they are on their journey, that where they are is okay and valid. Okay.
We are so pleased and genuinely grateful to kick us off with our Vice Chancellor, Professor Renee Leon. Professor Leon, who I can see you've got your pronouns there. Thank you so much. Professor Leon has only recently joined Charles Sturt and has agreed to come on board as a champion of the Ally Network. And that is so amazing for us because it helps us make sure that we can embed these inclusive practices right from the upper echelons of university management. So I will ask Professor Leon to say a few words and welcome us all.
Thank you. I'm really pleased to be here for the event today, and thank you for inviting me. I'm coming to you from the Ngunnawal People's Land in Canberra, though I do hope to be relocating to Bathurst once lockdown restrictions enable us, where I'll be on the lands of the Wiradjuri people. I pay my respects to our First Nations forebears and custodians. Universities pride ourselves on academic freedom, and we value academic freedom because we recognise that knowledge only flowers and grows if people are free to pursue and express a diverse range of interests and beliefs. And that diversity of thought that arises in such a climate is what underpins the success of universities. And in the same way, recognising and supporting the diversity of people's lives is key to an inclusive and successful society, of which the university should be a model. This is not only because it matters from a values perspective, but because supportive and inclusive environments enable people to be their best in work or study. And this is really directly relevant to the theme of Coming Out Day. If people don't feel safe to reveal their sexuality at work or in their student university context, they're less likely to feel satisfied and happy. People who are out at work are not only happier, but research shows they are more effective and more innovative. And of course, on a practical level, not being able to be out at work or in study limits people's abilities to form friendships and share social contact. Even that conversation on a Monday about how was your weekend requires a whole lot of carefulness about pronouns in case you get found out. And we don't want our students or our staff to have to be coming to the university and feeling that state of fear of judgment. We're a university that's dedicated to the public good. And so it's important that we advance initiatives that reduce discrimination and promote inclusivity and diversity for our students and our staff. And we're also in a unique position, I hope, as an influential presence within regional and rural communities where that fear of discrimination or judgment can be greater than in the big cities. I really welcome the work of the Ally Network because it aligns with the commitment of the university to equity, diversity and inclusion. And I'm pleased that you've asked me to become a champion of the network. I have long been a supporter of the many measures that workplaces can take to be more inclusive. And in my roles prior to taking up the Vice-Chancellor role, I've been the CEO of several Commonwealth government departments that have had active pride networks with identified allies to support them. The Ally Network actively contributes to providing a safe, supportive and inclusive environment for students, staff and visitors where people are encouraged to bring their whole selves to study and work. And I very much support the work that you do. I wish you well for your panel today, and I'm looking forward to supporting the network in your future events. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Leon. We're very grateful to have your support and look forward to working with you over the next few years.
Okay. And I would like to welcome our Georgia College Vice President of Student Affairs, Dr. Sean Brooks, who has also agreed to join us today for a brief welcome.
Thank you so much, Melissa, and thank you for inviting me to participate. I'm very excited to see what unfolds with this panel. Georgia College recognizes that diversity and inclusion are essential to our core values of reason, respect, and responsibility. We strive to achieve diversity excellence in the composition of our community, our educational programs, our co-curricular programs, employment practices, campus life. We also believe that a welcoming and inclusive environment is critical to attaining the kind of campus climate that allows members of our community to succeed in their endeavors, to be respected as individuals, and to feel a sense of belonging at Georgia College. When I think about the purpose of higher education, I'm always thinking that the genuine purpose is to compel people to unfold into the full expression of who they're in the process of becoming. And I'm so honored to be working closely with our LGBTQIA+ resources office, along with our Women's Center, that helps our students, regardless of their gender identity and sexual orientation, explore their full potential. I'm really very much looking forward to this evening. By the way, I should have started with my pronouns, he, him, his. Sorry about that. And if I learn how to change that on my little moniker up there, maybe one of our students can assist an old man with doing something like that. But once again, thank you so much for inviting me to participate. I'm really looking forward to the program.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Brooks, and we are thankful for your support as well. All right, so let's go ahead and hop into our panel. So a little bit about how today is going to go. We are going to start off with our faculty friends that are on this call. We'll just do kind of an individual introduction of each of them, and then they will have some time to share their own personal story. And then we will move to our students. And then at the end, we have some just time for questions. If they come up, feel free to drop them in the chat, message, one of us, and we will just kind of go from there and see what happens. So would like to start with Dr. Joanna Schwartz. Joanna lives in Atlanta, is a marketing professor at Georgia College. She's a governor's teaching fellow and speaker, researcher, and consultant on issues related to LGBTQIA+ health, marketing, and inclusion. So welcome, Joanna.
Hey, thanks for having me as part of this. So to sort of kick off, I was born before Stonewall. So back when it was illegal for two people to hold hands. And so there was, and I'm trans, and my pronouns are she, her. And when I was very young, I knew that this was something I could never say. I had liberal parents, and I'm getting feedback, I'm not sure why. But one of the things that I realized was that this aspect that I had, this idea of who I was, I knew I couldn't tell anyone. I couldn't tell my parents. I spent my childhood being afraid that somebody might find out. And I mean, knew that if they did, I'd end up in shock therapy. I still can't watch a movie that has an insane asylum in it because I spent my childhood frightful that would be me. So as a trans person in the 70s and 80s, I never really saw representation. There was at that point beginning to be LGBT representation, but I was an undergrad in college and I was taking abnormal psych. And in an abnormal psych class, that was the first time I'd heard anyone represent anything that was remotely like who I was. And the next day we covered schizophrenia. So I went to a doctor after that, and this was the 80s, and I went to the doctor and I said, well, I think I got this, what they're saying about being trans. And the doctor asked me 3 questions. He said, are you attracted to men? And I said, no. And he said, are you able to live right now? I mean, are you doing okay in school and things like that? And I was like, yeah. And he said, have you tried to commit suicide? And I said, no. And he said, well, you're not that. Because when I was in my 20s, that was the bar. And so I tried to live my best life. I got married, had a wonderful daughter, and my wife and I were, at that point, I'd had a doctorate and I was teaching. I still couldn't, had never really been able to deal with this idea of who I was and was supposed to be, and was in therapy about it. And one of the things that the therapy notes, I still have them. They were like, well, he thinks he should have been born female, but he's trying to make the best of it. And through that, at one point, my wife said to me, it's like, okay, well, you've got to promise me, it's like, I know you see the side of yourself. You need to promise me that it's something you're never going to do anything about, ever in your life, because, this is my journey too. And honestly, back then, I didn't think it was something I ever could do anything about. I'd never had a job before that you couldn't be fired for being trans. And I said, okay, well, I don't think that's ever going to happen with me. Societally, it wasn't possible. But, can I definitively say that? No. And that night, I had to sleep on the sofa. And the day after that, she had a lawyer and we were divorced for the small child. And one of the things that was discussed was that if I had at any point a change of lifestyle, that I'd lose custody of my daughter. And the thing about LGBT status, the thing about our gender identity and our sexuality, it's an important part of who we are, but it's not all of who we are. And I was never willing to give up every other part of my life. I wanted all of it. I wanted my daughter and I wanted my teaching job and I wanted to be able to live a normal life, but to do that as who I am. And I remarried and we had a child. And finally, when my daughter turned 18 and her custody wasn't in danger, this just came back up again. And by now I was working at Georgia College. It's the first job I've ever had where I couldn't be fired for being trans. And, this doesn't get easier with age. It's, it was really impacting. And I went into counseling and I went to a therapist who was supposed to specialize in gender issues, but they had never actually dealt with somebody who was really transitioning. So when I asked to say, okay, I'm ready for hormones, because one of the things you hear about hormones is if you need them and you take them and they work, then right? I always knew, but I wanted to be able to do that. And she was basically said, well, this is out of my league. Go see this other therapist and I'll make you an appointment with a endo. And so they made me an appointment with an endocrinologist. I had to be on a waiting list for 10 months before I could get meds after I had gone through like a year of gatekeeping. And then I waited my 10 months. And when I finally got a prescription for estrogen, I cashed it and took it in the parking lot of the drugstore on the way home. And could tell immediately, the next day, I felt different. 2 weeks later, I felt different. A month later, my sweat stopped smelling like guy sweat. Anybody who's a trans woman who's gone through HRT, the changes are incredible and life-changing, and for a lot of people, life-saving. And yet I was teaching in Guyville, right? Because it's really difficult to transition as a professor with 120 students every semester. So I didn't tell anybody. I started to tell my closest family. And people say coming out is like opening a door, but for me, coming out was like opening a door that led to another door that led to another door. And so I came out to my close family, I came out to my close friends, I came out to people who were close to me at work. And after a year, more than a year on hormones, when I couldn't really hide it anymore, I went to HR and I said, okay, well, I'm going to do this. And I've got a plan for it because, like I said, I wanted to keep my job. I wanted to keep my life and just become who I am. And I gave HR my letter and they said, you can't send people this. go back and redo your letter. And so I went back and redid my letter, and they came back into it and said, no, it needs to be one paragraph. Just tell people that your pronouns are she, her, and to call you Joanna. And, you know, at some point you've just got to say, well, no, I'm not going to do that. So I came up with a letter that I was sent to all my close people at work. And I came up with a Facebook post that you can read it if you go find, you know, look up my name on Facebook and my most important post ever. And so I set up to come out on Facebook and was walking into my first class of the day. And when I walked into my first class of the day, I sent out the letter to all the faculty. I sent out my Facebook post to all the world. And I went in to teach my first class. And I said to them, you know, because I'd had them all semester. And I said, you know, people are going to come to you later and ask you about me. And everybody was looking at me like, what are you talking about? And they're going to ask you about me. And I just want you to be able to tell them you had a trans professor and it was fine. And you could have heard a pin drop. And then everybody got out their phones. And by the time my next class came, 15 minutes after my first one ended, everybody was coming to see the show. You know, they wanted to see that happen again. So I came out 3 times to my different classes. And by the time I had gotten home, I had death threats and parents calling me to ask if, you know, I was corrupting their children. The weirdest thing was the first letter that I got was from some really good friends of ours who had a Christmas party every year. And it was addressed to Joanna and Donna, and it was uninviting us to their Christmas party. So, you know, it's just like that idea of coming out. There are bumps. I mean, it's not going to always be easy, but the thing about it is it's yours. Every person's coming out is their own story in their own way. And everything about it is liberating and worth it. You know, there's something so freeing about being yourself, about not having to hide and be worried about whether somebody knows, and recognizing, really the part of recognizing that this thing you've been afraid to deal with your entire life wasn't really anything to be afraid of at all. So my coming out was actually methodical. It took decades, but I'm in such a better place than I ever could have been otherwise. And I lost some people. The people I gained are so much better. So that's just a brief, actually it's not very brief, but that's the basics behind my coming out story.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Joanna. I think you've touched on something about how coming out, you just never stop. You have to constantly come out in every new situation, in every new environment you are. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. I will now introduce my colleague, Yanni Athanasopoulos, who lives in the Southern Highlands of New South Wales. Yanni is an academic with me in the School of Management and Marketing, a School of Business at Charles Sturt University, and he lectures in Human Resource Management and Industrial Relations. He's currently undertaking his doctoral studies exploring the demise of enterprise agreements in the private sector. Over to you, Yanni.
It was very nice of you there, Qlife. Thank you. So my story will start around the mid-60s, not because of me, but because of my parents. My parents, as you can tell by the surname, from a Greek background, both came from a small village in Greece. Both decided to leave Greece in 1965, considering how World War II and dictatorships destroyed the country. And they decided to leave Greece and come to Australia for a better life, as most migrants do. With that, my parents brought their cultures, their expectations, they brought the religion, they brought their lifestyle to a foreign country. So I just wanted to give you that background of where I've come from. Now, for me, the question I get asked all the time is, when did I know? When was the first cognitive thought in my mind to ask myself, why am I different? Why am I attracted to men and not women? Why do I see men as the preference rather than females? And I suppose I always ask people, the same question back and say, well, when did you know you were straight? Yeah, it's the same thing. But, if people really wanted to know, I would say it was around 8 or 9 years old. And I remember vividly around lunchtime at school, sitting down, having my lunch and just, observing all the kids as one does. And, and just looking around and just asking myself, why do I think this particular person is nice? And why do I think the female students in my class are just female students? But I couldn't understand the difference between the two and why I was thinking like that. So I suppose that thought process continued during my school life in the 80s. As all of us would know, we had the HIV/AIDS pandemic in the 80s, and I suppose that really dampened and put the lid back on my contemplation of coming out during school, during my teenage years. Also, the high school that I went to was in a medium to low socioeconomic demographics, and there were a lot of students in that school where homophobia was rife, and it was unheard of to use the words gay or homosexual. If you added yourself at school, it was pretty much a one-way ticket to a bashing at the end of school that day, which did happen to a few students in my year and in my school. And again, if I had really contemplated about keeping the door locked, I suppose after seeing a friend of mine being bashed for coming out at school, pretty much put the lock back on the door. So the contemplation of coming out did not happen during the school time. However, as I finished school and finished my high school certificate, at the end, the thoughts started to bubble and surface again. And it got to the point where I couldn't hold on anymore. I couldn't keep the door shut anymore. It was rumbling. I could tell my brain wanted to unlock that door and just open it wide open, not just open, but fling it open, which I did on the 26th of October, 1989. So that date will always stay in my mind because it was the day that I came out to my parents and to my sister. How did they react initially? They were all fine. I thought this was easier than anticipated because as my parents bringing their strict family religious cultures up to Australia, we were all expected to grow up in the, the correct way, if I could use that term. And yet here I am challenging that expectation from my parents, from the Greek community, from the church as well. Why am I rebelling against my parents and the religion that helped me grow and evolve to the person that I am? But I realized that I could not hold on anymore. It had to come out, which is what happened. Unfortunately, the road started to get bumpy, and for, I'd say, the next 2 years, I was pretty much being scrutinized by my parents, where I was going, with whom I was going with, even down to the point of what gender that person was. And things got that low that my sister was required to escort me anytime I wanted to go out, even if I wanted to go to the movies or go to a nightclub just to have a few drinks with school friends. The level of trust between my parents and I was pretty much non-existent. It was pretty much the Cold War in the Athanasopoulos family. And it reached a boiling point in 1992, where on Australia Day of 1992, I had this massive fight with my parents because they continued to try and steer me down the path that they wanted, and I wanted to go left and they wanted me to go right. And I just had enough. I just exploded, and every word under the sun came out. I cursed them. I threw things at them that I decided to just pack up and leave. I couldn't bear it anymore. I could see that it was destroying our family unit. And on top of that, we had a dear uncle who had just passed away on Valentine's Day with emphysema. So not only did we have my issue, we also had a family issue in the background that was just compounding and exacerbating the whole matter. I knew it was the right thing to do to move out, because if I hadn't moved out, for me, the family rift would have pretty much, it would have destroyed the family, and we would have gone our separate ways. I knew we needed a reset, so I moved out for about a year. A lot of people say, was that the right thing to do by moving out? Personally, I reflect back and go, absolutely. We both needed that reset button to spend time with ourselves and reflect on the matter, talk to people within our own communities or people that we'd met, and hence how I stumbled over the scene. As I was working in retail at the time, my manager, who was 20 years my senior, could tell that I wasn't happy, that I was always unstable at work. I was always distant, and reached out and spoke to me and wanted to know what was going on, and he outed himself to me. All right, and the whole the gaydar or the vibe. He said, I could tell that that you were gay and you're still trying to come to terms with it. So we'll call him Mark. Introduced me to the scene. So we would go out. He would escort me to a lot of the gay bars down Oxford Street, and it was just so nice that he would say to me, these are the bars you go to. There are other institutions that you can go to, but it may be quite extreme for what you want, and for who you are. Always kept telling me that I needed to dress accordingly, because let's face it, we're talking late 80s, early 90s here, where the HIV/AIDS epidemic was rife, homophobia was through the roof. We were being suppressed in every way, shape, or form. Bashings was a nightly occurrence in the scene. So to try and not be a target, Mark would always remind me to always dress appropriately whenever I would go out. It took my parents about 20 years to finally accept that. About my sexuality, because to them they felt it was a choice that I just woke up and went, here I am. But with support from the community and my cousins, they finally realized that no, it wasn't. It's not a choice. It was obviously a lifestyle. Since then, with marriage equality, the survey that came out in 2017, again, that threw contemplation matters back into my mind, and realizing that I have to justify myself again. Why do I need equality? Why do I have certain rules? Why somebody else can get married and be a rapist, and not me? So that pretty much upset me. But thankfully, reason came through, and that became law. And then finally, how is life now? Life is amazing. I couldn't be any happier. I've sent Qlife an image so he can share everyone. My parents and I are closer than ever. My cousins are also as close as we can ever be. I suppose my take-home message for everyone is you need to be true to yourself. You need to be true to yourself, number one. Number two, whoever you do come out to, you do need to give them time to process it and seek support for that. Don't expect people to be able to make a decision there and then. Okay, we're all different. Yeah, that's me. Sorry.
Thank you, Yanni. What a beautiful story to share. And thank you for that genuine explanation of your process. I was very pleased to be at your wedding last year.
Almost a year ago now.
We'll now move on to our students. The way we got our panel of staff and students was to demonstrate the diversity in these coming out experiences and how these coming out experiences changes over time. We're very fortunate to have Connor Bradford with us, who's from Charles Sturt's Port Macquarie campus. Connor is 29 years old and identifies as he, him, his. He's currently residing in Port Macquarie, enrolled as a student studying in the Bachelor of Nursing program at Charles Sturt, and is a member of the Student Representative Council for Port. Thank you so much, Connor. I'll leave you to share your story with us.
Thank you. Thanks for the introduction. Where do I start? Well, I moved to Australia when I was 10 years old, and before that I was just a kid doing my own thing. Didn't really have a preference of anything yet, still figuring out life. Coming out for me was very difficult, and it was really, I could relate to some of the stories that have been shared already. I knew that my parents were not very supportive to the LGBT community, and that put a lot of fear in me that I carried for a very long time, because my parents were everything when I was a kid. And, you know, you want to make your parents proud and all of that. So like I suppressed a lot of emotions for a long time. And when I was about 15, I was actually talking to, I should probably explain a little bit more. I was born a female, and I figured out eventually that I was a lesbian. And my mom actually caught me talking to a girl online. And that was when I was 15. We didn't speak about it again for several years. It was very heavy. And it got to a point where I couldn't, you know, hide myself any longer. So when I was about 18 years old, I thought I'd come out to my dad, seeing as I'd already had a negative response from my mum. And I remember we were in the car on the way home, and I told him that I liked someone, and it was a girl. And yeah, my dad's reaction, his face just went red and didn't say a word. Left me in the car outside the house. I was bawling my eyes out because I just wanted something, but I got nothing. And then, yeah, my mum came outside after he went in and said, hell will freeze over before you accept that in this house. And then that night, I pretty much got kicked out. And the next night, I came back at like 2 in the morning, and all my stuff was on the front yard. A little bit dramatic in a sense, but I mean, it's what happened. And there was so much going on, like, it was crazy. My mother, she blamed herself. She tried to make reasons as to why I was the way I am, like that she shouldn't have sent me to an all-girls school, and a lot of like trying to find reason, trying to encourage me that this isn't right, this isn't how I feel. And it just wasn't working. So after that point, we didn't talk for many years. I ended up meeting someone. We got together, and I was happy. Like, you know, I had a girlfriend, we had a place, lots of animals, and I still wasn't right in my own skin. So I thought there might be something a bit more to this, because like, as other people were saying earlier, people ask, when did you know? I didn't. I had no clue. I was still figuring everything out, and I allowed myself time to do so. And I'm glad that I had time to grow into myself, because I don't think it's something that needs to be pressured. You don't need to justify anything like that. It's your journey. Take your time. And I went to a psychologist, and the great thing about him is he was very old school. He didn't know much about the LGBT community, and he even said, like, you know, it's not anywhere on his radar, but from what our sessions and everything, he really felt that it was the right thing for me to do, because I saw myself as the man of the house, the provider, the masculine figure. Like, I actually looked up to my dad and all of that sort of things, and I didn't realize how, like, all the little signs I missed when I was younger. Like, I did prefer like male clothes, boy toys when I was a kid, like all of that sort of stuff. But I didn't think much of it back then because it didn't register the difference. Trying to think. My parents still don't talk to me. I've had the most problem with my parents. People around me have been fine, and because I've had such a unfortunate response from them, the negative responses from the rest of the community doesn't really bother me too much. And in a way, I think that's given me a strength to really support myself. And it's important, like, only just now, I genuinely feel I have a very strong support network around me, and it's the best feeling ever. And I'm so grateful. Even Charles Sturt, like, it's been amazing. Before I was in university, I was actually living in a tent for a month. So, like, it's been great. So I've, like, after working on myself, I feel like I've actually got somewhere. I'm being successful. I'm not worrying about what other people think. I'm not worrying about trying to make my family proud. And, you know, I'd always think of their perspective and that I'm hurting them emotionally without thinking about my own state. And that's not fair. And I don't think it's not healthy, is what I'm trying to say. Sorry, I've gone off track a little bit. When I was 25, I started hormones, and I chose the name Connor. No particular reason, I just like it. And I found once I was starting hormones that it felt right. I underestimated the emotional shift. But I went through it. I took everything day by day. The smells are different. Like, it's very bizarre. I love my beard. Didn't think that was gonna happen. Like, I know I've just said a lot of negative things, but let's go on the positive side of things. I am so in love with myself. And that's not even in an up myself sort of way, because I want to help people. I want to, like, share strength, and, like, I just want other people to experience that sense of self-worth. And, you know, it's crazy. Like, a few years ago, I was a mess. I was a complete mess. And now I love myself. And I want other people to feel that way. And now I am engaged. I'm very much in love. It's disgusting. And yeah, unfortunately, my parents still don't support me. I am hopeful, but at the same time, I can't put any effort into that relationship at this point in time, because it's not good for me. And it might not be good for them. I don't know. That's probably why it hasn't happened yet. But we'll see what happens. But yeah, the people I have around me, I appreciate very much. That'll do. I can't think of anything else right now.
Super. Thank you, Connor, for sharing. All right. So we are going to hop to Shiloh Allen. So Shiloh is a third-year student at Georgia College, majoring in psychology and liberal studies with a gender and sexuality concentration. They currently serve as the president of Georgia College's Pride Alliance student organization, where they have helped to organize events aiming to foster an active and diverse culture on campus. So Shiloh, go ahead.
Hi everyone, I'm Shiloh. I use they them pronouns. So for my story, I think it was Yanni who started when he first knew about being gay, and I, I think I always knew that I was attracted to women. It took me a long time to figure out that I wasn't attracted to men. Well, a bit longer time. So I didn't receive any really negative messages of queer people as I was growing up. No one ever talked about them around me. So I just knew that I liked women and I was fine with that. I had no issues. And when I was in the sixth grade, so about 12 years old, I first heard the term bisexual and learned what it meant. And I was like, well, that must be me. And having no idea about the negative consequences that could come about from coming out, I told a friend in my class, who was a really good friend of mine, and she told the rest of my class, like 5 minutes after I had told her that I was bisexual. And then my whole class knew, and it became a really negative experience. And I realized that it was something that I was supposed to hide. And so for the next like few years, everyone in my school knew about it. I didn't try to keep it a secret because they already knew, and other people were telling them anyways. And I would get really weird, inappropriate comments from boys especially ask me sexual questions. I was like, I'm 13. Like that's not appropriate. And I also came out to my mom around the same time as bisexual, because I have two lesbian aunts who have been together for a long time and who are pretty accepted within my family. And I told her that I was bi, and she said she had questioned her sexuality also, and that I would realize I was straight later on. So after that, didn't really speak about it very much. Just kind of kept it to myself. I had access to the internet, which is really where I found my queer community early on. And I think without being on the internet at a young age, I wouldn't have understood my identity as quickly as I've come to. So moving on a bit, a few years later, before I started high school, I realized I was a lesbian, that men just weren't it for me. So I told my best friend who is bisexual, and she was really accepting. And you know, without her, I don't think I would have had confidence to continue telling more people that I was queer. And I ended up finding a lot of queer friends. We kind of group together even when we're not open about our identities sometimes. So all of my close friends are queer or trans, the people that I grew up with and went to high school with. I never had an explicit conversation with my mom about being a lesbian. I think she just kind of realized it. But I did tell my dad, who growing up, I was baptized as a Catholic, but my dad was very openly an atheist, and always just told me everything he thought. And so I wasn't quite sure how he would respond, but he was accepting, which was really fortunate. I'm very glad that he was, but don't worry, the story gets a bit more dramatic in a few moments. So yeah, I was just living my life being a lesbian. During my junior and senior year of high school, I became really femme presenting, which was not something that I had done before. I was just I just wore regular clothes. I didn't wear makeup, etc. But I think I began delving into that femme presenting and the feminine parts of myself. And then when I came to college, I started using she, they pronouns because while I was experimenting with, appearing more feminine, I realized it felt like dress up. It didn't feel like I was wearing my clothes. So I had another non-binary friend who I was like, maybe I'm like them. And so I started experimenting with using she, they pronouns when I came to college, and eventually realized that she was not something I liked to hear about myself. It made me feel really icky. So I started using they, them pronouns. And I continued using the name that I was given, my birth name, while using they, them pronouns for a while. And I told my mom that I was non-binary, and she said, "I'll love you no matter what." I texted her, which do not recommend. It's a phone call kind of conversation, to be honest. Of course, do what makes you feel comfortable. But she called me and she said, "I will love you no matter what." And I was like, okay, I've got the go ahead from my mom, so I'm just going to tell everybody about it now. And I posted on Facebook that I used they, them pronouns and that I was non-binary. I have a lot of very conservative family, not my mom or dad in particular. My parents are also divorced, so that's important context for why those conversations were separate. And the comments I got on my Facebook post were very positive, but there were also a lot of comments I didn't get from really important people in my life who do not call me shallow and do not use my pronouns and have never acknowledged anything about my queer identity. And so earlier this year, I continued talking to my mom about being non-binary, and I told her I want to change my name. I'm not happy with the name that I was given when I was born. When you say it, it doesn't feel like my name. And that is where a huge rift happened between me and my family. Even my sisters, who are probably my best supporters, were like, I can't call you another name. And I had to tell them that it didn't matter, that my name was Shiloh once I decided that that was the name I was going with. And I wasn't going to answer to anything else. For me, it was really important to just put it all out there. I couldn't keep hiding things. I didn't see a reason to hide my identity. I was going to make people respect me. And if they weren't going to do that, I decided it wasn't worth it for me to have a relationship with them. So I had some really negative reactions. My mom said, "I will never call you Shiloh." I remember one conversation with her, and we got in a fight, and she kept calling me my dead name, probably to make me angry, to be honest. And I said, that is not my name. And at that point, I stopped talking to my family for probably 2 months or so. And so this is all very recent in my life. These are I feel everyone else's story is maybe in the later chapters, but I feel like I'm still at the beginning. Most definitely. I forgot what I was at. Oh yes. My sister got in a terrible car accident this summer, and so I had to get back in contact with my family, because after that happened, sorry, I don't know what happened. After my sister's accident, I I had to be with my family for about a week. And I brought my girlfriend who is on this call. We have been together almost 1 year. So we're, my family has started to perceive that perhaps this is something they need to deal with and acknowledge. And my mom, it has taken her a while to call me Shiloh and to practice using my pronouns, but she's done a lot better, which was really surprising to me, to be honest. And yeah, that's where I'm at right now, I guess. The point I really want to push is that come out for yourself when you are ready. Do not wait for other people to be ready. I waited to come out as non-binary for months and months because I was like, I just don't know how they will react. And the reason I finally decided to is because I just could not wait any longer. If I had waited any longer, my mental health just would have continued getting worse and worse. And being out has, like Connor said, made me so happy. I do love myself now because I feel so validated in my queerness and my transness and getting to live openly and be respected by the people that matter most to me.
Thank you so much, Charlotte, for sharing that story with us. It means a lot that you have shared that hard experience with us. I can tell we do have a fair few people watching us anonymously on YouTube, and I think that piece of advice which you just gave is do it when you're ready is perhaps the most powerful thing I would share too. Of course, coming out is a personal journey, and I think one thing that all the speakers have touched on today is this notion of family and how family can be a challenge, but they can come around eventually. Like Yanni's family at the wedding, it was just beautiful to see them there despite all the struggles. And through the process, of course, you find your chosen family. I think Joanna, Shiloh, Connor all touched on finding that community, finding that family. Committing on behalf of the Ally Network, I know we're here if you need a family. For those of you watching who might not be out or might be considering how you might do it, need the support, we're more than welcome to welcome you. So please reach out, please get in contact if we can help in any way. I think the last thing which we wanted to touch on today, and of course I am mindful of the time, is as institutions, what can we do as allies? What can we do as a community to help everyone? So I guess that's an open question which I'd like to ask the panel, but I would also like to ask everyone attending here today to reflect on and type your answers in the chat box. These will give us ideas for things that we as Ally Networks can try and work towards in the future. But really opening it out to everyone, with the panel, what can we as allies do to support people coming out or support younger people coming out? I might start with Joanna since you went first, if you don't mind, and then maybe everyone can jump in. But for those attending, please feel free to type your responses into the chat box as well.
Well, I would like to say something about that because one of the, I guess, privileges of being out on campus and visible, which I realize not everybody has the opportunity for. There's something that I've shared, and so one of the things that I'll a lot of times have, I'll have students come to my office and say, "Okay, I need to talk to you," and I've got this going on, and really, the first thing that we can do from the very beginning is to acknowledge that struggle and the strength it took to come and tell you. And when somebody shares something that personal with you, I realize some people may not have been ready for that information or known that it was coming, but that support and understanding and sharing of resources and really just reassurance that things are going to be okay are incredibly important. Like I said, one of the reasons that I always I'm really trying to be involved in our Pride efforts on campus because Pride isn't a random word, right? It's not like a team name. The idea of having pride in who you are and acknowledging that, especially after not or being afraid that you couldn't, that's really important. So one of the things that I really appreciate is to have allies. People who use my pronouns and correct other people when they don't. I mean, I've been dead named in meetings by our former provost, and nobody said a thing, and it means so much when somebody says, actually, no, having other people state your case is just great. Another thing, because I realize we're short on time, I might not get a chance to say it. A quote that really resonated with me was David Foster Wallace, who said, that of course you end up becoming yourself, right? That idea that however you get there, however your journey takes you, you're not meant to be afraid your life. How you decide to come out, some people decide in a week, some people decide it takes them much longer, but that's really important to recognize and appreciate.
Thank you, Joanna. What about Yanni, Connor, or Shiloh? Do you all have any thoughts that you would like to share with us about how we as allies can support people coming out?
I mean, for me, Qlife, I think from an institution's perspective, I'd like to see more visibility of who we are on campus. I think that's something that we lack. And would like to see more of. And also, I look back at my history and my reflection and think that if it wasn't for Mark, who took me under his wing and showed me the scene and the do's and the don'ts and where to get help and so forth, if I didn't have that buddy or mentor program, I may not have taken the path, or may not be down the path that I am now. So I owe a lot to Mark for holding my hand and taking me through that journey, and especially in those first few steps, to say, and as Joanna was saying, that it's okay, you will be okay, no matter what you face. You will face this knowing that you are true to yourself, and that's really, really important. From my perspective.
Absolutely, and I think I do like what Joanna and I think Yanni, what you both have been touching on, is the importance of allies to stand up and the visibility that comes with it. Connor, Shiloh, what are your thoughts? What could help? What could what would you like for academics like us and people who work at university like us to do to support you better?
Yeah, I was thinking that something that allies should do is not only be accepting and positive when someone comes out to them, but before the fact, making sure that they are projecting, especially if there's someone in a position of power at a university, like a professor or someone working with students, to make sure that everyone knows that they are a safe person. Without it being asked, like, is it okay for someone to come out to you? Oh yeah, I'm super supportive. Without being asked, saying, I am an open supporter, I am someone you can talk to, I will support you, to make sure others know that you are someone they can come to.
Thank you, Shiloh. And I think it is important to be out there to create that environment where people can feel comfortable to come out to you. It is definitely, I've had students come out to me, and it is an honor and a privilege when they choose to share that story with you. It's a very beautiful, beautiful moment. What about you, Connor? Finally picking on you at the end. Is there anything you would like to add?
I just completely agree with what everyone else has said, the importance of making support available and reducing the fear, making it more the norm. It would make a big difference for a lot of people. I can't really add anything else.
No, I think that's been absolutely beautiful, absolutely beautiful. Thank you to our panel. Are there any questions? If we've got the last couple of minutes, any questions for the panel? Part of our plan was to also have breakout rooms, so we're more than happy to get that started if whoever wants to stay back. But before we sort of go into the breakout, I just want to offer my sincere thanks to the panel. I know how hard it is to talk about these things. I know how challenging it is to share your story, but I know, looking at the number of people watching us on YouTube who've not been able to be with us today, I know that there are people benefiting from it. And it gives me such great pleasure that we've had this opportunity to share this moment and to share in your stories in this way. So thank you so much.